Hello, and welcome to this session for doing some transferring of ADAT tracks into Pro Tools. Going to do a level check with someone that's actually watching, so hopefully everything sounds good. Going to go ahead and enable these tracks here. Probably should have put a camera on the ADAT machine. Come to think, XT20 II. I'm running that using the analog cables, mostly because my light pipe cable went bad. I must have bent it and fractured the glass in the cable, so I'm doing it analog, and that's going directly into a Digidesign Digi002, which I know is a really old interface. It's a Firewire 1394 interface, but it still works really, really well, and you know, the sound quality is very, very nice. I do also have an 11 rack, which I could technically use if my light pipe was working, but since it's not, I'm using the Digi002 to use the analog interfaces. And I'm doing just a little bit of gain staging there on some of the drum parts for the most part, just to make sure that the levels with the guitars and everything are kind of matching as they're coming in to the DAW. I wanted to have a pretty decent simplet for the other tracks from this same group that I'm doing the transfer of. So I know that these settings in general work and are good, and I believe that these are just reset to zeros. Yeah, so they've oh, actually no, they are exactly as I single take, basically one live take. I know that basically the that all of the settings and things like that should be roughly the same, because over the course of the mix, I probably didn't make any huge changes as far as what was printed down to the ADAT tape. So it sounds like I need to turn up my voice slightly, so give me just 1 second to do that. A couple adjustments. I know that if I turn up the voice too much, you're going to hear some of the bleed from my headphones because these are edition. This track is a track called Jimpack 1500, and it's by a group that I helped manage and record and stuff like that many, many years ago. When these guys recorded this track, I mean, they were in high school. And I was, just a few years out of high school. So this was from 2002. And so, really talented group of guys. Even today, they're a really talented group of guys. So going to go ahead and start the recording in Pro Tools. And then I'm going to start the ADAT tape, and we'll get started listening to it. And once we've gone all the way through the song and gotten it printed into the DAW, we'll go back and I'll kind of show you what I've done as far as some of the mix and the EQ and things like that go. So you can see kind of like where I made some changes, and we'll listen to it without all of the EQ and stuff and compression and things like that, and then we'll listen. That horrible noise is my ADAT machine, and here we go.
The crazy world of the same. Aliens lived here on Earth. The monsters are your addictions fed to me. What if I were you, and what if you were a toad? Wander around of this, and your head will explode. Yeah, if I were you, and what if you were to ponder all of this in your head? Well, I can't see, I can't breathe, I don't know anything beneath this contradiction fed to be. What if I were you, and what if you were to ponder all of this and your head will explode?
All right, so now that we've got that printed into the DAW, let's go through and let's take a listen at some of the tracks. So, and I'm just gonna go through and disable all of the effects so that we can kind of hear what everything sounded like beforehand. Whoops, Alt. There we go. Okay, so all the inserts have been disabled, even on our stereo master, which is just a Pultec EQ. So let's go in and we'll start by listening just to the kick drum. I think it's a good place to start on pretty much any track, I think. And let's go ahead and trim down the track so that we can move it all forward up to the edge here. Okay. And just to start at the kick. So overall, pretty good set inside the drum. The PZM set inside the drum, beating from the kick drum sound really, really well. So it comes in really nice and clear. And then on the outside of the drum was that NDM 11, and that was getting some of the more bassy sound and a little bit of the slappy sound from the outer head as well. So, but overall, pretty good sound for the combined microphone. You know, in hindsight, obviously I would have preferred to have the control of those two mics independently, but doesn't sound too bad. So let's see what I did with the EQ. And what I did here was I added a Scheps 73, which is basically a Neve console 73 EQ and preamp. 073 pre and EQ. So just got rid of some of basically took out a little bit at the 360 range, roughly the 0 to 360 range, and that's mostly just to kind of get rid of that muddy sound that was in there. So if you can hear that muddy, flappy, nasty sound. We just take that out by cutting that part out. And how I originally found this was I actually used an F6, which is a real-time analysis. Made that change. A little bit of high end just to keep that click nicely coming through. And then doing a little bit of shelving EQ on the 60 band and just a couple of dB here, 4 dB. And then we're high passing over 50 just so we don't have too much of the, low end rumble that we don't really need. We could probably even, we have to keep it at 50 because our low is already at 60. So, but that sounds pretty good. Then I brought in a DPR 402, which is a compressor from the 80s that apparently was really, really popular. I mean, I hadn't heard of it when I was doing this in the late 90s and early 2000s, but been told it's a pretty good compressor, and I actually like this particular plugin quite a bit. Just doing about 3 to 6 dBs of compression here with 4.0 ratio. And nothing else, no de-essing, nothing like that on here, and no real peak limiting because it's pretty consistent throughout most of the recordings, just right in the right range. So we'll just take a look at the input here. We're getting just about -5 on the dB on the really hard hits. And output, we're getting just at 5, so we could probably turn up the gain just a smidge here on this track. But that looks pretty good. Let's hear what it actually sounds like. Okay. That sounds pretty good. Overall, I like that. And so one of the things I'm doing here is I'm actually busing the drums into a parallel compression bus, as well as this kick drum is also a key input for the bass guitar. So the bass guitar has a compressor, that the same 402 compressor there. So this recording scenario was just one that I wasn't terribly happy about, especially when it came to recording the snare drum, because I only had one extra microphone to record the snare drum. So I basically tried a technique that I had read somewhere in another magazine, a recording magazine, or some recording artist magazine, about setting the microphone back away from the snare drum to kind of capture both the top and the bottom head sounds acoustically. Unfortunately, that gets a lot of bleed, which you can hear. You can clearly hear the kick drum in there. The hi-hat is very clear inside this microphone, and it has a little bit too much of the bottom. Let's take a listen to what I did there. Again, using the Scheps 73 preamp and EQ. Again, just a slight boost on the 12K, 2 dB. A 3.1 dB cut at 2 to 3K, passing everything over 160, and I have this set in I have the phase switch actually turned on this so that it has a little bit more crunch when it's coming through, since you're also getting some play from the overhead microphones. So to me it sounded better with this phase button turned on, so that's what I did. So let's take a listen to that. Now it has a little bit more body, sounds a little bit more rich. Still not amazing, but you know, you do what you can do with what you have. You could try the drive. It just makes it sound really dirty. Okay, and then I added the same DPR 402 compressor here with, again, I was trying to just get 3 to 6 dB. It looks like this one's not quite getting that. And let's bring that back to unity gain. Okay, not sure why we're not getting more out of that. Okay, let's listen to it with the actual compression. Okay, kick and snare combined. Okay, I'm getting told that the music level's a little... Okay. Let me just check one thing here. Let's try to get the audio levels right. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the overheads. I'm going to just listen to them both at the same time. And I'm going to listen on this channel because basically what I've done is I've routed these two. Instead of going to the stereo out, they've gone into a bus. So I can use a single plugin, keeps the CPU use down, memory use down. I tried to match some of the volumes and inputs and stuff like that so that when it comes down into the DAW, it's a little bit more level than it was actually on the printed tape. Another reason why I wish I had a camera on the ADAT machine, because then you could kind of see those differences that I'm talking about. And on the overheads, it's really clear because the one side that's close to the snare drum is really getting a lot more volume overall. So tried to level that out a little bit as I was bringing it into the DAW here. So let's take a listen from that same part, and this is the overhead section. Had the drummer put some gels or some tape on the drum head to kind of keep it from vibrating and making that sound, because definitely hearing that boom, 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 boom sound as it's coming in through these room mics. But thanks to EQ, we can actually just bring that out. And if we take a look at the RTA6, I love this plugin because it's real time showing you, what your EQ is actually doing and kind of where things are actually at, where you're getting, the most level. And you can see exactly what I've done here. I've done a slight boost at 1K, another dip at around 3K, 3.5K, and then a low pass somewhere up in like the 12 range or 18 range, just to keep it pretty clear and airy sounding, which it definitely has the airy sound. So let's listen to what it sounds like after we put the EQ into it. Definitely got rid of that weird humming, boomy, the majority of it at least, of that tom that was kind of just ringing out. And I took out a little bit of the kick drum sound and stuff like that because don't really need a whole lot of it, but getting the more mid-range side of the kick and a lot more of that nice, powerful snap, like punch from the snare drum that you can hear in these two mics, which is nice. And definitely keeping that nice air and lightness to the cymbal sounds. And then I just put a CLA 76 on here. Just a little bit of compression, I think. I think I was just doing like maybe 3 dB of compression here. So let's see. So it sounds like these are just a little quieter than the ones I had before. So let's there we go. That should do it. And we'll check the input. That's probably as close as we're going to get to the original gain. Let's hear that again. So that to that. If I added the lows back in a little bit, you could probably almost just get away with using those overhead mics, the room mics. Okay, and let's hear that with the kick and the snare added in. Helps if I actually hit the right buttons. And then let's talk, let me just stop it there for a second. And now let's just talk a little bit about what I've done here with the parallel compression. So I have a stereo pair here of the DPR402s, and I have it set to do just normal compression and just gonna get like a 2-to-1 ratio, fairly fast attack, about 2.5 milliseconds. And then pretty fast release as well here. Even though really, you know what? I think I'd like to change that. So yeah, so we'll we're bringing it in right about there, and I think that's 250. Yeah. And so we're just gonna just added punch effect, which is really, really awesome. So let me remove the bypass on that, and without aim, a couple more dB, 2 more dB, 6, 5.5. Difference when you come down to the whole mix and you get like the bass and the guitars and the vocals all in there. It's just really adds like that meatiness to the drum sound. Okay, let's oops, I do that always. Let's take a listen at the bass guitar. Me personally, up or down in the mix without having to do a whole lot of other stuff to the other channels besides, you know, maybe adjusting their buses. So let's take a listen to the bass, and we'll listen to this little intro part because this is the, put it on slip here. Now, right off the bat, the one thing that I do notice here is that if I'm looking at the amplitude of the kick drum, snare drum, and the drum overheads, it's quite a bit lower than the rest of the drum tracks. So, and it looks like that's the same situation for the guitars and the lead vocals. So I think what I'm probably going to do here first, very quickly, is go through with all of these tracks really quickly, and that should give us a lot better signal to noise. So overall, the bass guitar was recorded with just a direct box straight into the console, nothing else. He still had an amp that he was listening to while they were playing, but it went from his bass into the direct box, out of the direct box into the amp, out of the direct box via XLR into the console, and yeah, and then down to tape. So what I did here was I just used the F6 again, just to kind of find those frequencies that maybe seemed harsh or didn't really fit completely in the mix, or, you know, struggled against the guitar parts. So if we're listening to that again, actually, let's go ahead and set the loop up on end. And I kind of wanted to keep that in here to kind of just give some body to the mix. So I'm not doing a low pass here. Excuse me, I am doing a low pass, but it is at the 60 mark, and it's, you know, just a 12 dB cut. So, you know, allows some of that lower end to come in and really keep that part of the bass sound really nice and full. Another little lift at 700. A slight dip at 4. That's another 12 dB cut. So let's listen to what that sounds like. Maintained all the lows, took out a little bit of the muddiness, added a little bit of clarity. That's what the 7K and the 1.4 were for. Overall, sounds pretty good. Then I went into a CLA 3A. And if we look at the gain reduction, we're getting, I was doing about 6 to 12. I was trying to get between 6 and 12 roughly. So quite a bit of compression here. And the main reason for that, I really wanted the bass to be, you know, very level, because this is kind of like a driving forward kind of song. So I wanted to have that real nice consistency with the bass. So doing about 6 to 12 dB of gain reduction here. Input to output matches so it sounds really good in that sense. And then the next piece here, this is actually the that side chain compression that I'm using as a dip, basically, for when the kick drum is hitting. So when you hear the kick drum, you'll and if we actually solo the kick drum, as well. And we won't hear the kick drum on that part, so we got to move to this part. And if we unbypass this, you can see that every time that this is actually hitting is right when the kick drum is hitting. So that bass guitar kind of just moves out of the way a little bit, lets that kick drum pop through, and then goes right back to its normal thing. And just a slight little 3 dB gain reduction there. All right, and then next I'll start with one of the guitars, the one in the left ear. And I forgot that I do have a guitar bus on this one, so these are all bussed off to the guitar bus. Overall, really nice guitar sound, especially for the mic that I used. It was really not like the greatest mic in the world. It was like a AKG. I had actually forgotten the power supply to my console, so I actually ended up having to use a mixing console that they had there that they used to practice with, and it had no 48-volt phantom power. So everything was recorded on microphones that didn't from where I actually lived. So it was a trek to go back and get it, and so we ended up just recording the album with a bunch of dynamic microphones, and I think it didn't turn out too terribly bad. But the one reason that this guitar sounds particularly pretty good is the amp that it's going through. This is actually a Mesa Nomad, I think, which just a little 1x10 or which any mic would do, and that AKG mic. So I just did a little bit of the EQ just to kind of like, you know, take out a little bit of muddiness, add some clarity, things like that. So here's what it sounds like with the EQ. I really wanted those highs to kind of like cut right through the mix right there when I was doing that. Bip, 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 bip. And then I just added a blue face, or silver face if you prefer, CLA 76 on the guitar setting, and then I just adjusted to, you know, between 6 and 9 dB of gain reduction. And again, you know, this is a driving beat. I really wanted to keep it pretty consistent and keep the levels really consistent. And unfortunately, I didn't do great gain staging with them on their amps between clean and distortion. Really subtle difference there. It's, you know, it really just kind of calms those transients down quite a bit, which is good, because you don't want I wanted that cutting through, but I didn't want it to like be harsh to the ear, and without the compression it definitely gets pretty harsh to the ear. So okay, and let's listen to the other one. I don't remember the amp that Robert was going through on this one, but again, the same microphone, AKG D60s. And I tended to mic, and here's the cone part. I put it basically on that line around the edge of the cone. Excuse me, sorry about that. Around the center. And that kind of gets a blended sound between the, you know, really like sharp edge sound and the, you know, the warmth of the speaker as well. So just used a little Pultec EQ on this one, the MEQ5, 5 dB boost at 200, a dip at 700 at 2 dB, and then another little boost of 5.5 at 3K, and no gain change. And the Pultec here just really adds some nice warmth to it. You know, it was it wasn't quite as full sounding as that Mesa Nomad. So, you know, this definitely brings it into that same sound caliber as the Mesa. 5 to 9 dB of gain reduction. Unfortunately, I did notice that I get a lot more bleed when I'm pulling this in here, because I think his amp was closer to the drums than the other one, and there was just not really good separation. Even though I know for a fact that we took, basically this was recorded in a living room with cathedral ceilings, and we had taken the couch cushions off of the couches and put them around all the amps, so that the guys could still hear them kind of, but there wouldn't be a whole lot of bleed through. But as you can hear, there's still quite a bit of bleed through that's actually coming through. So, and here, one of the things I'm doing is with this DPR 402, again, I'm doing some ducking compression here with the and I actually forgot to set the key input. I don't think I actually said it, but so right now this is actually just supposed to be a ducking compressor, but I actually did not set up the key input, which we'll do while we're on here. So let's go ahead and head into the vocals, and we'll come back to that ducking compression. Okay, let's see. Vocals. Let's just start from right here, and we'll just kind of go through and listen through the whole track with the vocals, so that we don't have to listen to that same part over and over again. That will be a little monotonous, probably.
Phantoms or galaxies, vice versa for the same. Goblins were gremlins and Batman was robbing the crazy with the...
Okay, so right off the bat, first thing, right, is that you can tell that this is using a dynamic microphone, and it's live in the room with the band. You can hear the drums in the back. You can hear amps and bass guitar and all that stuff in this microphone, right? So there's a lot of bleed through. This is not one of the overdub tracks. This is, there were 4 tapes to this recording, so, and each one was roughly about 40 minutes. So, about 3 hours worth of recording total. And so, yeah, so this is not the best track, but I thought it was a pretty good example of a song, and it was clean and had both distortion and clean sounds. And I thought it was a good one to go through. And even, if you're recording on not the greatest equipment in the world, that you can do great things with it and turn it into something that sounds pretty decent, with the right plugins, with the right EQs, with the right mic placements. Really, getting good sounds in an acoustic recording is all about the setup. Getting the right sounds, taking the extra time to set up, the guitar player's amps gain staging, right? Something that I didn't do here, but, in later recordings, I learned from the mistakes of this recording to really go through those kinds of steps with, the customers that I had back when I had this project studio. So it's really important, more than anything, just to do the setup correctly, get the mics in the right place, get them positioned in a way that, really gathers the best sound that you can with the equipment that you have. And you can make, decent sounding recordings with, very, very cheap equipment. I mean, like I said, the guitars were recorded with D60s. Just go Google that. You'll see what I'm talking about. It's nothing special. It's not even like SM57 quality, it's cheaper than that. So, but yeah, so the vocals here, I think it was an SM58 or something like that, maybe something similar, that he was recording the vocals with, and he's sitting down on a couch or a chair while recording these vocals, because we already knew that these were going to be scratch vocals. So the recording was done, in a fashion where he's kind of just kind of, you know, singing them and kind of not. Some of the songs he gets into more and some a little bit less, but, you know, definitely, you know, a good example of how to really make something sound really nice with just a few little plug-in tweaks and things like that. So with this one, with the vocals, I wanted to again bring in the Scheps because I really like the sound of this plugin because it just adds this really nice warmth and smoothness to the tracks. It really just sounds good. So I brought it in as a full reset, basically, as you can see here, and I brought in quite a bit of 12K to really, you know, pull out the airiness and breathiness of his voice to make it sound more like it was a condenser mic, you know, get more of that breathy sound, get more of that clarity. And that's why, you know, I also, you know, add 3.5 dB at the 4 to 8K range. I mean, these are things that you probably just would not give that much gain to in a condenser mic, but, and then I rolled off at 220 to take some of that bassy presence from him having the microphone, you know, too close to his mouth. You know, kind of just like this, right? The broadcast miking effect, right? That proximity effect that you get by being too close to the mic, you get too much boominess, which was an effect and a style of recording vocals at one point. And then let's see, I'm doing a high pass filter here at 160, so trying to keep as much of the muddiness out, the boom out. So let's listen to that with just the EQ.
Phantoms of galaxies, vice versa for the same. Goblins, gremlins, and Batman was robbing the crazy were the same. Aliens,
you can hear it sounds really nasally, just flat.
The women took us all to heaven, but we'd still complain.
And
I can't see, I can't.
With the EQ, definitely sounds a lot more like a condenser mic in terms of clarity. Next thing in the chain was, again, the CLA 76. It's a pretty universal compressor, so I tend to like it quite a bit on this. I also like the 2A on some vocals, but not this kind of vocals, not really rocky vocals, because you need something that's just going to like smash the daylights out of the vocal as it gets out of control. So so here again, I think I'm going to be doing at least 6 dB of gain reduction on this 4:1 ratio, fairly slow attack, very quick release, and yeah, just again doing gain matching in inbound and outbound. So let's actually leave it bypass. We'll play it and
Goblins, gremlins, and bat. I can't see, I can't breathe. One of this, and your head will explode.
Okay, so yeah, and then the next part that I did was just a little bit of de-essing here. So this is strictly in de-ess on high frequency mode. And I'm pulling about the 8K range at 8.6, and I'm doing about, and since I'm in de-ess mode, it's automatically doing the right amount. It's just de-essing off of whatever I set the thing to and the threshold to, and a 4:1 on that. So pretty soft, pretty gentle, probably not as soft as I could be, because that is a shelving EQ. So you get some of the rest of the bands nearby lifting as well on that. So kind of needed to settle that down, and that's what this is for. It's just kind of coming in and clearing up some of that sound. So we'll just go ahead and add that in there. Or actually, let's go leave it bypassed, and I'll show it. And okay, so right there, you hear is like right off the bat, like right in that first little line, right? So let's listen to it. I'll try to do the pass, then then on the second pass, and then bypass, and then on again.
Atoms of galaxies, vice versa for the same. 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 Atoms of galaxies.
So you can see it just cuts down that really sharp, that first one that really cuts through, is like really, really loud. So just a real subtle, knockdown of the S's. All right. And now, so there's one other piece that I needed to do, right? And we said we were going to put together a bus for this vocal. And I think we'll just use this 21. And we're going to send Unity to that. And then over here on our guitar bus, we're going to use the input from bus 21. And that's going to be our key input. So basically now what's going to happen is the guitars are going to, anytime the vocals are in and on top of the mix. So let's go ahead and start from just before the vocals start. So you can see we were getting just...
I can't see, I can't breathe, I don't know anything. Meaningless contradictions fed to me.
So again, really subtle, but just enough to help the vocals really sit really well in the mix. Okay, and let's take a listen to the whole track now, at least from the beginning, and we'll listen to maybe the first measure and the first chorus before we kind of turn on the, we'll go ahead and turn the reverb on so that we can hear reverb. And let me just actually show you. You can hear it's just like a simple plate reverb, nothing too crazy. I adjusted the settings here from this medium plate. I did adjust the room size and the dimensions and things like that. So, but yeah, so that's good. And now we'll go back and we'll listen to the whole thing here. Okay, just checking with my sound person on the other side. Okay, so let's go ahead and, like I said, let's listen to the first verse and chorus without the EQ from the master, and then we'll click that master EQ in somewhere in the middle of that. And again, this is just a Pultec, just to add a little bit of warmth. This is Levine Track Warmer setting from the settings.
For the same. Goblins were demons and Batman was robbing the crazy were the same. Aliens lived here on Earth, the monsters are human state. The women took us all to heaven, but we'd still complain. I can't see, I can't breathe, I don't know anything. Meaningless contradictions fed to me. What if I were you and what if you were a tough ponder? And your head will explode. Yeah.
So without the EQ, with the EQ. And that Pultec is really just adding like just a little bit of warmth to it. It's very, very, very subtle, but I think it really tops the track off nicely. And that's pretty much it. That's basically how I've attacked pretty much most of the songs that are on these ADAT tapes. Bringing them in via analog. I would prefer to do it digital because it's a little better, a little cleaner, but the analog method still works for those who are curious. Yeah, so I'll just let the track play through one more time so you can hear the full mix all the way through, and we'll call it a day.
For the same. Goblins were villains and Batman was robbing. The crazy were the same. Aliens lived here on Earth, the monsters are human stay. The women took us all to heaven, but we'd still complain. I can't see, I can't breathe, I don't know anything. Meaningless contradictions fed to me. What if I were you, and what if you were a toad? Ponder and your head will explode. Yeah. Before thinking about our brains, what if instead we use 7 8s? The sky would be purple, the cat be a gerbil, and pleasure would be pain. Everything would contradict itself, but only in the eyes of you. A mushroom, a flower, and weakness, big power, death metal was at the moon. I can't see, I can't breathe, I don't know anything. Meaningless contradictions fed to me. What if I were you, and what if you were a toad? Ponder all of this, and your head will explode. If I were you, and what if you were toad? Ponder all of this, and your head will. I can't see, I can't breathe, I don't know anything. Meaningless contradiction fed.
Okay, well, that is the whole track. I really appreciate everyone watching. Thank you for coming by and watching the stream, and I'm sure I'm going to have some more of these, and maybe I'll even do some live performance streams. Not really sure yet, but thanks again for watching. Make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.